June 25, 2009. Sirens outside a Los Angeles mansion. Breaking news banners. And a single, staggering line, Michael Jackson is dead at 50. Hours later, the coroner cites acute propofol intoxication. 2 years after that, his personal physician is convicted of involuntary manslaughter. It felt like the final twist in a life already stretched between miracle and menace. Here was the most electrifying performer of the television age, the architect of Thriller. The man whose moonwalk stopped time, trailing a dossier of allegations that divided a planet. In 1993, a 13-year-old's accusation detonated into police raids and a reported multi-million-dollar civil settlement. In 2005, after a grueling, televised trial, Jackson was acquitted on all counts, 10 felonies and 4 misdemeanors, yet the public verdict never fully aligned with the legal one. Between stadiums and courtrooms, masks and morphing faces, childhood stolen on stage and adulthood spent under the most powerful magnifying glass celebrity has ever known. His story asks a question no obituary could answer. Was Michael Jackson the costliest casualty of fame? Or the author of a myth so incandescent it burned the man beneath it? And what, in the end, does justice look like when the evidence is talent, trauma, and time? Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana, the 8th of 10 children in the working-class Jackson family. His father, Joseph "Joe" Jackson, worked at a steel mill and harbored dreams of a musical career. His mother, Katherine Jackson, was a devout Jehovah's Witness who instilled in her children a strong sense of faith. The Jackson household was crowded, disciplined, and dominated by music. Joe, recognizing the talent of his children, assembled them into a group, first with his older sons Jackie, Tito, and Jermaine, and eventually including Marlon and young Michael. Though just 5 years old, Michael displayed uncanny rhythm and an expressive voice well beyond his age. Soon he was front and center, the lead singer of what became the Jackson 5. Life at home was far from idyllic. Joe was a strict disciplinarian, often using physical punishment to enforce obedience. Michael would later describe his father as both a driving force behind his success and a source of deep emotional trauma. The rehearsals were relentless, the expectations high, and childhood pleasures often sacrificed for perfection. While his siblings played in the yard, Michael was memorizing steps, practicing vocals, and enduring his father's harsh critiques. Despite the strictness, the Jackson family operated as a unit with shared ambition. Katherine nurtured Michael's sensitivity and creativity, often shielding him when possible. His siblings, though occasionally resentful of his spotlight, became his lifelong collaborators and confidants. By the late 1960s, the Jackson family's talent had outgrown Gary. Joe took the group to talent shows and small gigs until they signed with Motown Records in 1969. For Michael, barely 11 years old, the move marked the end of an ordinary childhood and the beginning of a life that would never again be private. The foundation of Michael Jackson's life was built on paradox, love and abuse, unity and control, faith and fame. From this crucible emerged both the genius that would electrify the world and the scars that would haunt him for decades. Michael Jackson's education was anything but ordinary. While other children his age attended school daily, Michael split his time between classrooms and recording studios. He enrolled at public schools in Gary, Indiana, and later in Los Angeles after the family relocated. But his formal education was fragmented. Tutors often accompanied him on tours, and the constant travel left him isolated from peers. His true schooling came not from textbooks but from microphones, dance rehearsals, and the harsh discipline of the stage. By 1968, Michael, just 10 years old, was the centerpiece of the Jackson 5. The group signed with Motown Records, joining Berry Gordy's powerhouse label that had already launched stars like Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, and Marvin Gaye. Gordy recognized Michael's rare charisma and quickly shaped the group's image around him. Diana Ross herself introduced the Jackson 5 to the public, presenting Michael as a prodigy destined for greatness. In 1969, their debut single, I Want You Back shot to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Followed quickly by ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There. Remarkably, their first 4 singles all topped the charts, a feat unmatched at the time. Michael's soaring vocals and uncanny stage presence electrified audiences. At just 11, he was already being compared to James Brown and Jackie Wilson. Balancing this explosive success with school life was nearly impossible. Classmates saw him only sporadically, and when he did attend, he was often mobbed or treated as an outsider. Michael later admitted he felt lonely and robbed of a normal childhood. Yet the stage became his refuge, a place where his insecurities disappeared under the lights. During these early years, Michael absorbed everything around him: Motown's slick choreography, Berry Gordy's perfectionist production style, and the artistry of legends he idolized. While the Jackson 5 were marketed as a group, it was clear Michael was the star. He practiced obsessively, studied dance routines, and began to develop the precision and innovation that would later define his solo career. By the time he reached his teens, Michael was no longer just a child star. He was a seasoned performer with a work ethic forged in Motown's demanding system. His early education may have been unconventional, but it prepared him for the global stage he was about to conquer. By the late 1970s, Michael Jackson had already spent a decade as the face of the Jackson 5. Yet he longed for something more, a chance to step out from the family brand and establish his own identity. That breakthrough came with Off the Wall, 1979. His first major solo album as an adult, produced by the legendary Quincy Jones, with hits like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You. The album sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Michael's blend of pop, funk, and disco announced him as a solo force. For the first time, he was not just a former child star, he was a serious artist. If Off the Wall was a statement, Thriller, 1982, was a revolution. Again collaborating with Quincy Jones, Michael crafted a record that fused pop, rock, R&B, and even horror tropes into a cultural phenomenon. The album broke every barrier, topping charts in over 25 countries and becoming the best-selling album of all time. With sales surpassing 66 million copies, singles like Billie Jean, Beat It, and the title track dominated radio and MTV. While the Thriller short film, directed by John Landis, redefined the music video as an art form, Michael's 1983 Motown 25 performance, where he debuted the moonwalk, became one of the most iconic televised moments in music history. In that instant, Michael wasn't just a singer, he was a global symbol of innovation, style, and magic. The white glove, the sequin jacket, and the gravity-defying moves etched him permanently into pop culture. The mid-1980s cemented his crown as the King of Pop. His 1987 album, Bad, spawned 5 Billboard #1 singles, a record at the time, and his corresponding world tour broke attendance records across continents. Michael wasn't just popular, he was untouchable, a figure whose influence spanned music, dance, fashion, and even humanitarian causes. Beyond the numbers, Michael's artistry was transformative. He bridged racial divides in the music industry, becoming the first black artist to dominate MTV, opening doors for generations that followed. His short films turned albums into cinematic events. His choreography influenced countless performers, and his voice carried a unique blend of vulnerability and power. By the end of the 1980s, Michael Jackson was not just the biggest entertainer on earth, he was arguably the most famous person alive. Crowds of thousands wept at his presence, fainted at his concerts, and mobbed him wherever he went. With an estimated 750 million records sold globally, he was wealthier, more recognizable, and more influential than any other pop star in history. Yet success of such magnitude came with a cost. Michael increasingly lived in isolation, retreating into his Neverland ranch and surrounding himself with children, animals, and fantasy worlds that blurred the line between reality and performance. While the 1980s cemented his greatness, They also set the stage for the controversies that would dominate his 1990s and 2000s. The story of Michael Jackson's success is not just one of record-breaking sales and moonwalks. It is the story of an artist who reinvented what it meant to be a pop star, boundless creativity, relentless ambition, and a cultural reach that no one, before or since, has matched. Michael Jackson's personal life fascinated the world as much as his music. For someone who spent his earliest years rehearsing, touring, and recording, intimacy and romance often seemed elusive. Yet the relationships he did pursue, whether confirmed or rumored, were magnified under the harshest spotlight imaginable. In the late 1980s, tabloids linked Michael to stars such as Brooke Shields and Tatum O'Neal. Both women later confirmed they had been close to him, but whether those bonds were romantic or platonic remained ambiguous. What is clear is that Michael, already living in an isolated world, struggled to build ordinary relationships free from scrutiny. The most high-profile romance of his life came in 1994, when he married Lisa Marie Presley, the only child of Elvis Presley. Their sudden union stunned the world, the king of pop, and the daughter of the king of rock and roll. For Michael, it was both a personal bond and a public statement, an attempt to counter growing suspicions about his private life in the wake of child abuse allegations in 1993. Their appearances together, including an infamous MTV Video Music Awards kiss, only fueled debate about whether the relationship was genuine or a carefully orchestrated performance. Behind closed doors, however, Michael and Lisa Marie shared real intimacy. She later recalled her struggle to support him through accusations and his reliance on prescription medications. The marriage ended in divorce in 1996, but Lisa Marie remained one of the few people Michael trusted deeply. Soon after, Michael entered into his second marriage, this time with Debbie Rowe, a dermatology nurse who had treated him for vitiligo. They wed in 1996, and Rowe gave birth to two of his children, Prince Michael Jackson, 1997, and Paris Jackson, 1998. The marriage, however, was unconventional. Debbie herself admitted the union was largely about giving Michael the family he craved. They divorced in 1999, with Michael receiving full custody of the children. In 2002, Michael had his third child, Prince Michael II, nicknamed Blanket, via a surrogate. His identity as a single father raised further speculation, especially after the infamous incident in Berlin where he dangled the baby briefly from a hotel balcony, a moment that crystallized public concern over his eccentricity. Michael's love life was never free from suspicion or ridicule. Critics doubted the authenticity of his marriages, while fans defended his longing for companionship and family amid a life of unimaginable pressure. Whether with Lisa Marie, Debbie Rowe, or his role as a father, Michael seemed driven by a desire for stability and belonging, things his own childhood had denied him. Ultimately, his marriages were as unconventional as his fame. They produced moments of scandal and speculation, but also 3 children who became his proudest legacy. Behind the spectacle, Michael's search for love and family revealed his most human side, a man desperate to create a sense of normalcy in a life defined by anything but. If the 1980s crowned Michael Jackson the king of pop, the 1990s and 2000s put him on trial, not only in courtrooms, but in the global court of public opinion. His spectacular rise was matched by an equally spectacular fall, as allegations of child sexual abuse consumed his reputation and reshaped how the world viewed him. The first major scandal erupted in 1993, when 13-year-old Jordan Chandler and his father accused Jackson of molestation. Police raided Neverland Ranch, seizing photos and documents, while tabloids splashed sensational headlines across front pages. Michael vehemently denied the charges, insisting his relationships with children were innocent expressions of his childlike spirit. The case never went to trial. Michael reportedly paid a civil settlement of over $20 million, but the damage was irreversible. To millions, he was no longer just a beloved entertainer, he was a man shrouded in suspicion. The stress of the scandal took its toll. Michael canceled parts of his Dangerous tour, citing an addiction to painkillers. In public, his appearance continued to change, his skin lighter from vitiligo treatments. His face altered by plastic surgeries, feeding endless speculation that blurred medical reality with tabloid myth. For a time, Michael managed to stage a comeback. His 1995 album History, Past, Present and Future, Book 1 was both a retrospective and a defiant rebuttal to critics. With tracks like Scream and They Don't Care About Us addressing the media circus. But the whispers never faded. Then in 2003, a documentary titled Living with Michael Jackson reignited the firestorm. In it, Michael casually admitted that he sometimes shared his bed with children, though he insisted it was innocent. The revelation was a PR disaster, fueling long-standing suspicions. Months later, Michael was arrested and charged with multiple counts of child molestation involving 13-year-old Gavin Arvizo. The 2005 trial was one of the most watched legal spectacles of the decade. Over 4 months, prosecutors painted Michael as a predator who exploited his fame to lure young boys. The defense countered with testimonies portraying him as eccentric but harmless, a man emotionally stunted by his stolen childhood. Dozens of witnesses testified, including celebrities like Macaulay Culkin and Wade Robson, who defended Jackson and denied any misconduct. In June 2005, the jury delivered its verdict, not guilty on all charges. Michael wept in relief, but the acquittal could not undo the damage. For much of the public, not guilty did not mean innocent. Sponsorships evaporated, record sales plummeted, and Michael retreated further into isolation, moving between Bahrain, Ireland, and Las Vegas in the years that followed. Financially, Michael's empire crumbled. Years of lavish spending, Neverland Ranch maintenance, art collections, entourages, had drained his fortune. By the late 2000s, he was hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, forced to mortgage assets like his stake in the Beatles' music catalog. The man who once redefined wealth in entertainment was now trapped by it. Culturally, Michael became a paradox. To some, he remained a genius unfairly hounded by greedy accusers and an exploitative press. To others, he embodied the dark side of celebrity, a predator shielded by fame. The truth seemed lost in a storm of evidence, emotion, and speculation. What is undeniable is that Michael Jackson's scandals reshaped the trajectory of his life and career. He went from beloved global icon to the most polarizing figure in entertainment. The man who sang of healing the world now symbolized broken trust. By the mid-2000s, Michael was both free and imprisoned, acquitted by a court of law, but condemned by the court of public opinion. His downfall was not a single moment but a long unraveling, an erosion of innocence, legacy, and the myth of untouchable greatness. By the late 2000s, Michael Jackson lived as a ghost of his former self, still idolized by millions, yet burdened by scandal, financial ruin, and a fragile body that could no longer keep pace with his ambition. He retreated into privacy, bouncing between mansions in Bahrain, Ireland, and eventually Los Angeles, rarely seen in public without masks, veils, or an entourage. For many, he had become a symbol of eccentricity, his genius overshadowed by strangeness. Yet Michael still longed for redemption. In 2009, he announced what he promised would be the ultimate comeback, a series of 10 concerts at London's O2 Arena. Titled, This Is It, the shows quickly expanded to 50 dates due to overwhelming demand, selling out in hours. For a man deep in debt, the tour represented salvation. For fans, it was a chance to witness the king of pop one more time. Behind the scenes, however, Michael's health was precarious. Years of prescription drug use, painkillers, sedatives, and anesthesia-level substances had left his body dependent and his mind fragile. Rehearsals revealed flashes of brilliance. He still glided across the stage, his voice still capable of magic, but also moments of exhaustion and frailty. The immense physical demands of preparing for 50 arena shows weighed heavily on a man who had not toured in over a decade. Those closest to him noticed his reliance on Dr. Conrad Murray, a personal physician who provided nightly doses of propofol, a powerful anesthetic typically reserved for surgeries. Michael reportedly called it milk, believing it was the only way he could sleep. The arrangement was reckless and unsustainable, but it reflected Michael's desperation to silence the insomnia that had plagued him for years. On June 25, 2009, weeks before the tour's launch, Michael Jackson was found unresponsive in his Los Angeles mansion. Paramedics rushed him to UCLA Medical Center, but it was too late. The world stopped as news spread. The king of pop was dead at 50. The official cause, acute propofol intoxication administered by Dr. Murray, ignited outrage. Murray was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2011, but for many fans, the verdict offered little closure. Michael's death triggered a global outpouring of grief. Vigils erupted in cities worldwide, from Tokyo to London to Rio. His memorial service, broadcast live, drew an estimated 1 billion viewers. Even in death, Michael Jackson proved his unmatched ability to unite the world through spectacle. The comeback he had envisioned, 50 sold-out shows, a triumphant finale, never happened. Instead, it became a documentary film, pieced together from rehearsal footage, offering glimpses of what could have been. Fans saw a man still capable of brilliance, even as his body betrayed him. Michael's attempted comeback, like much of his life, ended as both triumph and tragedy. He died preparing for a stage he never set foot on, still striving for the perfection that had defined and destroyed him. More than a decade after his death, Michael Jackson's legacy remains as complex as it is colossal. On one hand, he is remembered as the greatest entertainer of the 20th century, a man whose music, dance, and cultural influence reshaped pop forever. On the other, he remains shadowed by allegations that refuse to fade, leaving his memory suspended between reverence and revulsion. His catalog continues to thrive. Thriller remains the best-selling album in history. His videos are studied as works of art, and artists from Beyoncé to The Weeknd cite him as a foundational influence. Younger generations, born long after his peak, discover his genius each year when holiday stations replay Thriller, or streaming platforms surge with his classics. In terms of artistry, Michael's impact is untouchable, yet documentaries like Leaving Neverland 2019 reignited public debate, presenting detailed allegations from men who claim they were abused by him as children. To some, these accounts solidified long-held suspicions. To others, they were unproven stories that tarnished the reputation of a man who could no longer defend himself. The divide is stark. Michael Jackson is either a victim of a merciless press and opportunistic accusers, or a predator shielded by celebrity. In his children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, now Bye Guy, fans see the most tangible part of his legacy. They carry his name and, in some ways, his burden, but also his artistry and philanthropy. Paris has pursued music and acting, openly grappling with her father's complicated shadow, while his sons remain more private. The question of how history will remember Michael Jackson is unresolved. Perhaps it always will be. He was both genius and enigma, a man whose very life blurred the line between fantasy and reality. His death closed the book on his story, but not on the debate surrounding it. Today, Michael Jackson exists in duality: the moonwalking god who gave joy to billions, and the troubled figure whose private life still unsettles the world. His story has no clean ending, only an open question. Can art ever be separated from the artist, and should it?